A man does not become a man until he's willing to make choices. A man does not become a man until he confronts his father. Most people, many of us, we live with that fear for the rest of our lives, never breaking out, never breaking free, never fully maximizing our potential because we're living in the shadows, we're living in the fear.
I wonder, what is the true meaning of surrender to you?
Sadly, in our culture, we have this misconception that surrender is weak. Surrender is the most powerful thing that you can do. You feel that there is more. You feel that there is something bigger calling you, but often we resist that deeper calling out of safety, out of sanity, out of self-preservation. The best things in your life that have happened, you didn't plan.
How does one start to take these steps in their life?
Number one, what lies am I telling myself? Number two, what am I pretending to not know? Number three, I think that's the path of being a man, the willingness to be that ruthlessly honest.
Welcome guests. Good to have you here, listeners. Back to another episode of the Authentically Man podcast. I'm your host. And today we have a man with us who is a man who's been in the spiritual world for a long time. You could argue it's probably in his genes. It's in the way that he was raised in the world and brought into this world. And it's lovely to speak to a spiritual teacher that doesn't hail from the United States, because so many do. Someone who actually comes from these shores, not too far from these parts of the world where I am. I'd love to introduce you to Kute Blackson. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, perfect. I like to just dive in with people. I guess a question that kind of comes to mind is, a lot of us on our kind of spiritual path, spiritual growth path, there's usually an instance of pain and difficulty that kind of, spurs us in some way to a particular piece of growth. So I wonder for you, what was the kind of moment of pain or the situation of pain that kind of catalyzed your growth to some degree?
Yeah, I don't know if it was one particular moment, to be honest, because I was born into an environment that some might consider a bit unusual. I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana, my mother's Japanese. I grew up in London till I was 18. And so I felt like I was from everywhere and nowhere. To be honest, as a young boy growing up in London from the age of 3, I didn't really feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I was British. I go to Ghana, I didn't feel like I was Black or Ghanaian. I didn't feel like I was, I go to Japan, didn't feel like I was Japanese. So in school, I felt like a bit of an outsider, like who am I and where do I belong and do I fit in anywhere? And so I think that stirred some pain for me as a young boy of not really feeling like I belonged. And I think that drove me into my own spiritual search, even if it wasn't conscious at the age of 5 and 6. It definitely drove me to start asking the questions of who am I and where is home and where do I belong and do I have a tribe? And I look around and I see so many of my classmates. They just had their tribe, and they were part of something that was very easily definable. And so I remember sensing that and feeling a very deep level of aloneness as a young boy, of not really feeling like I fit in. And with that, simultaneously, like my first memories as a kid, I remember seeing, I must have been around age 6 or 7, and seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. And she picks up the gravel and the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face and stands up. And so we call that a miracle. Week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear. The same man whose sand she picked up would look at a person in a wheelchair and he would say, "Hey, stand up, you're not sick." And they would say, "But I haven't walked in 10 years. And then he put his hands on them and they would miraculously start walking. And this is pre-internet, pre-social media, no lights, no cameras, none of that jazz. It was just me, there, people, real, raw happenings. And so week after week, I grew up seeing this happen. Somebody would come in crutches and he would say, "Throw your crutches away," and they would walk. And so the blessing was I grew up thinking this was normal. I didn't grow up thinking that there was anything particularly mystical, special, extraordinary about this. It was just, you brush your teeth, you go to school, you do your homework, you put on your socks, your underpants, and you see someone stand up out of a wheelchair. it's just part of life. And so this man was my father, who performed these miracles. And he was considered a miracle man of Africa. He was you could say, spiritual guide to the king of Ghana, the presidents of Ghana, heads of state in Africa, West Africa, and all throughout Africa. Built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, a huge church in London. And when I was age 8, he basically threw me in the audience and said, speak. And that began my, shall we say, speaking career. And I don't remember what happened other than words started coming through my mouth and just something happened. And so this was a bit confusing to a young boy who already felt out of place. And now this shit was happening to me that I didn't understand. And I go to school and try to explain it, and people thought I was crazy, right? And so that again took me down the path of just trying to search and understand what was happening to me. And so I was sneaking to my father's office. We lived literally behind my father's church in Peckham. And I would take all the books, the spiritual books off of his bookshelf, just trying to understand life and the nature of existence. And age 8, read my first self-help book. And so between 8 and 18, probably read 800 books, just trying to figure out life, you know. And when I was 14, I was basically ordained as a minister in my father's church. And I was given the mandate as the successor to my father's spiritual organization. And that began an interesting journey because I did not feel that this was my calling. I did not feel that this was my path. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. But I felt that my heart sank because I felt as though the structure of religion or church, shall we say, was not my soul's trajectory. I felt like I took the next 4 years to try to fit myself into a box of becoming who I thought my father and the world wanted me to be, much to great pain, because whenever we betray our truth, whenever we are not authentic, whenever we betray our own inner integrity, pain. It's pain, and pain is the signal. Pain is the messenger. We can suppress it. We can drink it away, sex it away, smoke it away, drug it away, shop it away, whatever it is, but the pain is there for a reason. And I felt such pain in my heart, in my body, in my being, just trying to be who I thought the world wanted me to be. So there was a pivotal moment. When I was 18, I looked into my future and I felt as though my soul, literally, there was this deep calling in my soul that said, go to America. And why America is because America, specifically California, specifically Los Angeles, this is where all of the self-help authors and teachers and spiritual teachers, you know, Marianne Williamson, Louise Hay, Chopra, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Jack Canfield. This is what all the authors I'd read as a kid, this is where they happened to live. So for me, this was the Mecca. And so when I felt this calling in my soul that said, go to America, it made no sense to my logic. It made no sense to my mind. I think many times when your soul guides you, it will not make sense to your logic or your mind. It will not be convenient. Your soul doesn't care about convenience or comfort. It cares about growth and evolution and authenticity. And so when my soul said, hey, go to America, it was terrifying. It was scary because I knew what that would mean. And I knew the consequences that I would need to speak to my father. I need to renounce everything, leave everything behind. And, you know, at least at that moment, I thought that was the end of my life. And so it was terrifying because my father was a very old school African man where basically, hey, it's my way or it's my way. Which way would you like to choose, you know? And so this is my dad, and he was iconic. And as a kid, I looked up to him. I idolized him like many boys do. And long story short, I felt I didn't have a choice other than to follow my calling. And what I have found in my life is when you follow your soul, when you follow your truth, when you are obedient to the direction of your soul, you will always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right thing, even though the pathway that you take may not be the one that you most expect. And I have seen it repeatedly play out and proven in my life. And so I took the plunge, I took the leap, I jumped off the cliff, and I had the conversation with my father. We didn't speak for 2 weeks. Sorry, we didn't speak for 2 years, rather. It took me weeks to muster the conversation, but 2 years we didn't speak, which was incredibly painful. I think a lot of people think that when you are authentic and when you listen to your soul, the angels appear and the violins play and everything is, the self-help books make it sound all romantic. But the truth is, sometimes when you follow your true soul, all shit falls apart, all hell breaks loose. You're thrust into the dark night of the soul where you don't know heads from tails, and it is terrifying and it is scary, but it is the void and the path that we have to go through in order to grow. And many times people think that when they follow their soul in pursuit of the purpose, when things don't flow and unfold, the manifestations happen, that oh my God, I've taken the wrong path, I'm doing the wrong thing, and then they give up and they backpedal. But often when you follow your soul and you hit the abyss, you hit the void, challenges start unfolding in your life, it's actually a sign that you're on the right path. The challenges are really the soul tests that you have to go through in order to evolve. The soul tests that are simply preparing you to become the person, the human, the man that is capable of fulfilling the dream and vision that the universe has given you. And so, yeah, my father and I, a lot of pain. We didn't speak for 2 years, deeply painful. I felt abandoned, I felt hurt, but I knew that I was on the right path. I think for a man does not become a man until he's willing to make choices, to face the consequences of his actions. And I would say as a man does not become a man until he confronts his father. And a man does not become a man until he faces his father. A man does not become a man until he, in quotation marks, kills his father. In other words, he's willing to disappoint his father so that he can reclaim his power. And whilst I didn't know it at the time, this is part of what I was doing, which was disappointing my father, killing my father so that I could truly reclaim my life and my sovereignty and my own power back as a human and as a man, as evolving into my own man, becoming my own man. And it was difficult. It was painful. It was, I wish I could say I was happy, but I knew underneath it all that I was on the right path. And I felt peace. I felt pain, but I felt peace because I could look myself in the mirror. I felt I was being true to my soul. I felt that I was being authentic to myself. And that was the peace underneath the pain. And again, long story short, I ended up winning a green card in the green card lottery that enabled me to come to the US at the age of 18 with 2 suitcases, $800 in my pocket, and just following a dream. I had no college education. I had $800, 2 suitcases, 1 suitcase full of clothes, the other suitcase full of self-help books, and nothing but a dream. 18, landed in LA. This was pre-internet. So I asked I just had a map of LA, and I asked the taxi guy, I said, look, take me somewhere safe and cheap where I can stay for a few weeks. He dropped me off in Venice Beach, which at the time was quite crazy. And I cried for 2 weeks straight, thinking, what the hell have I done? Wanting to run back, wanting to turn around. But deep in my soul, I felt I did not have a choice. And that began my journey, of this whole path. Anyway, that's a bit of my story.
Wow. It's an incredible story and journey. And the piece you were saying there about sovereignty from father, it's such an interesting. I was actually speaking to one of my clients about this recently and saying to him, it's like at some point we must rebel against our parents' rule, the rule of our parents, the way that they want us to be and they want our lives to be, because otherwise we're always living with the kind of under the puppet master of one of our parents, our fathers, in our minds, deciding like, what should I do in this instance? Who should I go on a date with? Who should I marry? And we're basing it off one. But we have to kind of cut that umbilical cord to create that, like you said, sovereignty and freedom for us to start being like, well, who am I in this world? And what's calling me forward? And, I just hear that, 2 years is an incredibly long time to not speak to a parent. But I imagine
painful.
that
it's painful.
I imagine that even before that, the burden you must have been carrying to follow in his footsteps, like to look up to such a great man who's performing miracles, is a really heavy burden for a young boy to be carrying through the world, to have to expected to step into those shoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. But, it was painful. I had to make peace prior to that conversation of releasing my father and the possibility of never having a relationship with him ever again, which was my greatest fear. That if I dared to be myself, if I dared to be authentic, if I dared to be true, then he wouldn't love me. We would never speak again. We wouldn't have a relationship. This was my deepest fear. Most people, many of us, we live with that fear for the rest of our lives, never breaking out, never breaking free, never fully maximizing our potential because we're living in the shadows, we're living in the fear. And so I had to make peace and grieve prior to having the conversation, the end of the relationship with my father. And I had to make peace with my deepest fear of what if we never have a relationship again? And I had to surrender and release my father prior to the conversation, so that when we had the conversation, even though it was difficult and challenging, I had already let him go and made peace that we may never have a conversation. It's tough, it's difficult. And so it was years of heartbreak prior to the conversation. And even having the conversation, I can't say I felt happy. I went from the conversation straight to my bedroom and I cried because I felt like I had shattered my father's heart and I had let him down. But I began that process of making peace for years prior to that, I would ask every man, since you say many of the folks listening are mostly men, I would ask every man to sit with the question of how would you live if your father was dead? Because we say we're free, but many times as men, as boys, there's always like, oh, what would my father say? Oh, how would my father approve of this decision? Would my father approve of the girl I'm dating? Would my father approve? But something happens when your father is dead and you're no longer looking energetically, psychically, emotionally, spiritually to him in any way for any validation. It's just between you, yourself, and God. And that is a tremendous freedom. And so rather than waiting until he actually dies physically, sit with, how would I live if my father was dead? And feel how you're living now. Feel the choices you're making now. And if you would say, oh yeah, I might actually, I would date this person. Okay. Or I would actually go do this thing and I'm not doing it because my father might, he might not be so. If you feel yourself not being authentic in any way because maybe my father in the background of my consciousness, then you are seeing the places in which you are not free. You are seeing the places in which you have not fully stepped into your manhood and assumed your true power. And so how would you live if your father was dead, and see if it was different in any way, if it would be different in any way. And I think as men, we have the opportunity to truly free ourselves so that we can reclaim our life, become creators of our reality, and be the bearers of the power and the throne for the next generations.
So there's this like cutting ourselves from our parents. It's like this psychically, because I think that's one of the ones we do most of all, right? Is psychically, we're like holding them in our energetically, we're holding them like, what shall I do? I need my validation. And I guess my question is,
some of it's not even conscious. Some of it, we might say, I don't give a shit. I'm free. But we don't realize that even some of the goals that we set, we're sort of unconsciously trying to prove ourselves enough to our father, right? We're trying to show our father that, look at me, I made it. We're trying to show our father that we are enough for him. And not that it's conscious or intentional, but it's there in the background of our consciousness, right? And so I think as men, to really be free, we have to look at that and be honest to sort of unravel that within our own psyche, right?
Yeah. And and I know a big theme for you is surrender, and you mentioned surrender there. You know, surrendering to this idea that, you know, maybe your father will never speak to you again and your relationship is over. A lot of the kind of concept we have about surrender as the word is we kind of see surrender as this weakness. You know, I see this a lot with men. If you talk about surrendering, they're like, well, is that capitulation? Is that kind of giving up? And I wonder, what is to you, what is like the true meaning of surrender to you?
Yeah, I think we have this misconception in our culture of surrender. What I want to start off by saying is I really believe through my experience of living that surrender is the most powerful thing that you can do. That surrender is the real key and the real secret to manifestation. That surrender is the real password to true freedom and the next level of your life. Sadly, in our culture, we have this misconception that surrender is weak, that surrender is passive, that surrender is giving up, that surrender is waving the white flag, that surrender is if you're going to be a doormat, right? If you surrender, you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. If you surrender, you're going to get less in life. And I'm actually saying, no, if you surrender, what if you didn't get less in life, but you actually got more? More than you could have imagined, more than you could have planned, more than you could have intended with the limitation of your conscious ego human mind. Maybe not what you thought, maybe the path will look a bit different, right? But what if it was better or beyond? You look at someone like a Nelson Mandela, respected man, an iconic man, by no means a weak man, right? I mean, the man was the man. And we're still talking about him generations later. This was a man that surrendered. You look at his life. That's not a life you can plan. Yeah, I'm going to, imagine him sitting there with his little journal to set some goals. Yes, I'll spend 27 years in prison. Then I'll come out of prison. It's like he surrendered himself, and that was beyond his planning. Anyone that did anything truly great, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad Ali, Bruce Lee, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Mother Teresa. I mean, the list goes on, right? Anyone that did anything great, whether they knew it or not, at some point they had to come to the point of surrendering themselves to the next level, surrendering themselves to a deeper truth, surrendering themselves to, you look at Gandhi, who was a lawyer and had a certain path and trajectory. He had to surrender the life he thought he was going to be living. That was a comfortable, cozy life, because something bigger than himself was calling him. And many of us as men, you feel that there is more. You feel that there is something bigger calling you. You feel that there is a pull in your soul that is undeniable, but often out of fear, out of self-preservation, out of comfort, we don't listen to that. We don't surrender to that. We resist that deeper calling out of safety, out of sanity, out of self-preservation. And we wonder why we feel unhappy. We wonder why we feel miserable. We wonder why we might feel depressed. We wonder why we feel lack of energy, because we are resisting the deeper flow, the deeper expression of our soul in the surrender. And so surrender is a feeling and a trusting your soul's calling. You look at the great ones. At some point, they all had to surrender themselves and let go of the limitation of how they thought their life should be, who they thought they should be. And in that surrender, they transcended. That's when they transcended their own human limitations, right? Martin Luther King was not a perfect human. Mother Teresa was not a perfect human. Mandela, not a perfect human. But in the surrender, they transcended their human limitations. And that's when life was able to use them. Life was able to express through them. The divine intelligence was able to manifest through them in ways that perhaps they could not have imagined for themselves. To me, this is the magic of surrender. We all want magic. I mean, who the hell doesn't want magic? But we're often not willing to surrender. And so the next level of your life, whatever it is, the next level of your purpose requires the next level of you. The next level of you requires that you let go of everything and everyone that is no longer in alignment with who you are today. But most of us, we get comfortable with who we were. We get comfortable with what we know. We get comfortable with our old identity. And so we hold on to that which is no longer working, not realizing that that is the very thing that is blocking the flow of grace, the flow of blessings, the flow of manifestation, the flow of abundance, the flow of relationship, that is blocking the next level of our purpose, because you cannot manifest the new or the next level being the old. So we have to let go. Surrender is a letting go. Surrender is taking the limitations off of life. Surrender is a letting go of control, shall we say, or the illusion that we're even in control. Because if we all look at the best things in our life that have happened, right? If everyone you just check, the best things in your life that have happened, meeting that person, meeting your soulmate, this thing happening, that thing happening, much of it you didn't plan. It kind of happened. It happened in the process of living life. You were living life and boom, you met that person that changed your life. And so if you didn't plan it, right? We spend so much of our logic, especially as men, so much of our logical mind trying to analyze everything, plan everything, control everything, because we mistakenly think that if I can control everything, the world, the surroundings, the universe, the sun, my pet gerbil, my goldfish, my friend, my girlfriend, my wife, if we can control everything, then I'm not going to get hurt in some way. But we end up limiting so much of our lives, and control is the master addiction, and control is the ego strategy to try to protect you from getting hurt, not realizing that in trying to control everything, you end up limited. You end up limiting the flow and the grace and the magic of life. And so surrender is a letting go of control, letting go of who you think you should be, how you think life should be. It is a deeper opening, an allowing yourself to let life guide you, to let life lead you. And this is when the magic happens. Surrender is a shift from the, shall we say, the ego-based model, the ego-based paradigm of living life, which is all about control, which is all about, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? Okay, let me make it happen, and I'm going to impose my will on life. It's an ego-based model for living life. You might create and you might manifest from your ego, but it will always be limited, because the ego is limited. The ego is limited to the past, what it knows. It can't create beyond the known. The ego is limited. So for me, when you're living surrender, the question to ask is not, what do I want? The question to really ask is, what is it that is seeking to manifest through me? What is it that is seeking to express through me? What is it that is seeking to be created through me? What is life seeking to express through me? What is my deepest truth as a man that is seeking to be expressed? And I think when we can listen, attune, feel our deepest truth, and then align our personality, our ego, our goal setting, our planning in alignment with our deepest truth, and then give everything to that without attachment, then you're living in the flow of surrender. Surrender is not, some people just want to make clear, mistake surrender as, oh, I'm just going to go with the flow of whatever it is. And so the flow means, hey, I'm married, but I kind of feel like fucking this woman over here, so I'm just going to surrender to the flow because this is what's happening. That's not surrender. That is just you being a slave to your biological urge, right? Oh, I'm just going to surrender to my 7th tub of Haagen-Dazs. That's not surrender, right? That is being addicted. I'm just going to snort some cocaine. I smoke some weed. Whoa. Is that really surrender? No, that is often just following and being a slave to your biological urge rather than something deeper. So surrender, let me be clear, is when you feel the deeper truth, the deeper calling, the deeper commitment to what you're really committed to. And it might mean that you sometimes have to do things you don't feel like doing. It is not following the fleeting mood of the moment. It is a feeling and a commitment to the deeper truth. It's like, well, I don't feel like going to the gym right now and training. I'm not in the mood, but I know that going to the gym and training and being strong is going to give me more energy to live my purpose and be healthy. So I'm going to wake my ass up and go to the gym, even though I don't feel like it. That's surrender. I never felt like writing my books. I've written 2 best-selling books. I never felt like writing. I'd rather be at the beach. I'd rather be hanging out with friends. But every time I didn't feel like it, I had to feel my deeper commitment to lives being touched. And when you feel the deeper to what you're more deeply committed to than the superficial fleeting mood of the moment, the surrender is to that. And that's what true surrender is. So it might mean you going where you don't want to go. It might mean you doing certain things you're not in the mood to do, but there's a deeper commitment. And this is why I say, and not to go too deep for the beginning of the conversation, but the deeper I have gone into my own evolution as a man, as a being in my spiritual path, the deeper I go, the less choice I have, the freer I am. The more in ego I've been, the more choice I thought I had. Yeah, I can drink beer, get drunk, snort cocaine, eat ice cream, donuts, be unhealthy, screw around, do all these things. Yeah. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. The more limited you actually are. And that's the real surrender. It's surrendering to the deeper truth and the deeper calling. When you live in alignment with that, which is really living in alignment with your soul, that is what it is, I think, to be truly authentic. A lot of the people are saying, your show is called Authentic Man, right? A lot of people are like, I'm being authentic. I'm just being myself. I am what I am. But we don't realize that what you are is just a conditioned reaction to the pain of your childhood. You've become a certain way, you're acting a certain way, you've become independent, you've become this way, you've become that way, you've developed roles, masks, and personas that you identify as you, and you think that is who you are, but it's not who you really are. It's just a set of conditioned patterns that you hold on to, thinking that the version of what you've become is who you are. The true authenticity is something deeper. Anyway, I could keep going, but
yeah, no. And I want to really hone in on one piece that you said actually was around the kind of illusion of choice, right? We live in an age now of a lot of choice and a lot of distraction as well, where I get this, a lot of men come to me and they're like, well, I want to be free, and freedom means being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. Sure. So I'm trying to create a life where they can do that. It's usually they're starting with the finances and then they want a certain type of relationship. But what I'm hearing you say there is that this is actually the biggest prison. The biggest prison is trying to do whatever you want, whenever you want.
As men needs to understand this. Jesus could not do whatever he wanted. He was held to a higher calling. Mandela, if he was going to do whatever he wanted, he would have said, F this shit. I'm not going to prison for 27 years. I'm going to go live my life. But would we have had Mandela? Perhaps that 27 years and surrendering to that path was the necessary seasoning, refining of his own self so that he could become the consciousness of the Mandela that we know to be. What if he didn't spend 27 years in prison? He may not have developed himself to become the Mandela that we know, and the collective consciousness may have not ripened to be ready for Mandela and that impact. So when he came out in a few years, probably was able to accomplish in a few years more than 27 years. So what if he resisted and said, "No, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm not gonna follow the path that is unfolding." Could have done that, right? And so real freedom is not just doing whatever you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, as many times as you want. That is not freedom. A lot of men think that, freedom, I want to have multiple women, this, that. No. There is no freedom in the world. Let me repeat. There is no true, ultimate freedom in the world. Yeah, get your finances in order as a man, because that helps to facilitate certain things. But the truth is, how many meals can you eat at one time? How many Lamborghinis can you drive at one time? How many underpants can you drive at one time? How many women can you fuck at one time? How many socks can you wear at one time? How much can you do? There's no real freedom in the world, because everything in the 3D world is transitory, is impermanent, and is temporary. It doesn't last. See, the thing with men is we are wired to seek freedom. It's a masculine drive to seek freedom. Freedom as consciousness, which is eternally free. So many times as men, there is an innate, natural intuition beyond logic of seeking freedom. The challenge is we are seeking freedom in the wrong places. We are seeking freedom through sex. Because what happens when you are, I hope we could have this conversation, right? But when you're, as a man, you're like, oh, make love, have sex, beautiful woman, orgasm. What happens? For that moment, right, you are this limited little ego. And the degree to which you are identified with yourself as this mind, body, form, Kute, right? David, I'm this thing, and you're limited in this mind, body structure, black, white, green, orange, Mexican, Nigerian, African. This is me. The degree to which you are identified with yourself as little limited ego form is the degree to which you are not free. Your story, your beliefs, your identities, your religion, the degree to which you are holding on to your identity is the degree to which you will feel limitation. And so there is an innate urge to seek freedom. And so now we're locked into this little ego self, holding so tightly as me. I'm not enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. And now we're going through the world as this little limited self, ego structure. The moment you, let's say, make love, have sex, you have an orgasm, boom, for a moment, boom, you dissolve, bam, freedom. You tasted a sliver, a few seconds of freedom. Until the orgasm is over, bang, back to your little limited self. You know, I'm this body, I'm this form, I'm this thing, I'm black, I'm white, I'm green, I'm Jewish, I'm Christian. And now you hold so tightly, now you're back in this little prison of a personality. So there's a natural intuition inside of a man to seek freedom. We're intuiting the freedom, we're just looking for it in the wrong place. Real freedom, we have forgotten, is an inner state of being. Real freedom is within you. Real freedom is essentially what you are. Your consciousness is free. Your essence is freedom. You've just been conditioned otherwise. And so for a man to be truly free, he will not find it in sex. He will not find it in alcohol. He will not find it in drugs. He will not even find it in money. He will not find it in the world. It's what Jesus said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. It's a code. He didn't say kingdom of heaven is in your crypto wallet. The kingdom of heaven is in that juicy woman. The kingdom of heaven is in like having 17 Lamborghinis. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Boom, that's the code. And so for a man to be truly free, we must, as men, cultivate a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice where we can transcend ourselves, where we can transcend our little ego limitation, ego prison persona. When we can transcend our little limited ego self prison persona, and we can connect with the infinite dimension of freedom of our being through our meditation, our prayer, our spiritual practice, then we die to ourselves. In our spiritual connection, we die to our little self and we access the infinite self through our meditation and our spiritual practice. Then you connect to the dimension of yourself that is eternally free. And when you connect to yourself that is eternally, truly free, as divine, as consciousness, as pure being, it changes everything. That's the real freedom. The real freedom is inside.
Mm-hmm. And you make it sounds incredibly seductive, but it also sounds so easy, right? And I guess we both sit here and we know that it's not as easy as it sounds to feel that part of us that is so free and expansive. in the kind of day-to-day life we have with all the conditioning that we've had and all
Yes.
the world around us and the families and the bills to pay and all these things. So I guess the question that comes to me is, how does one kind of start to take these steps in their life when they do have the stresses and struggles of life, they do have the worries and the fears and the conditionings and the trauma and the pain from the past that kind of layer on and get in the way of our ability to touch this infinite soul part of us that, you know, goes beyond space and time?
Yeah, I think if people say, okay, where do I start? Where do I start? I'll simplify it. And this is where I always encourage people to start. I think one of the things that stops us or blocks us from being free are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. We're constantly lying to ourselves. Sometimes we don't even know that we're lying to ourselves. We're in denial because we don't even know that we are lying to myself, right? And so there is no freedom or there is no transformation without truth. Truth for me is real spiritual practice. Truth is real church. Truth is real prayer. Truth is real meditation. Truth is real yoga. You cannot bullshit your way to freedom. And so you have to want to be free more than you want what you have. You have to want to be free more than you want what you think you want. And so if you really say, I really want to be free, you have to just be willing to start with the truth and start by looking at all the lies that you are telling yourself. Just start there as a man. If as a man, you can sit down with yourself and have self-reflection and start taking real inventory of yourself without judgment and start looking at, number one, what lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? Because we play games with ourselves to keep ourselves, protected in self-preservation. Oh, I'm confused. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's like, like, I don't know if this relationship is right for me. You know it's not right for you. You know deep down, you know. But we play these games. I'm not sure what my purpose is. You know what your purpose is, but maybe you're afraid if you really own what your purpose is, now you're going to have to go for it and you no longer have an excuse. But if I'm confused, I'm just confused, I'm seeking my purpose, then you don't really have to go for it. You can always have it in the future as a future fantasy and possibility and a hope in the future. So deep down, we know, if we're honest, we know. So number one, what lies am I telling myself? Number two, what am I pretending to not know? Number three, be willing to feel the pain. The pain that you feel is the pain and the wisdom of your soul speaking to you, telling you something's off. We stay in relationships that we know are not right. Well, out of convenience, out of safety, out of fear, right? We work jobs that we hate, that we know is not in alignment with our dharma, with our purpose, out of convenience, out of safety. Now, I would say to men, look, take the pressure off of yourself from having to even take any action, just to be fair, right? Because sometimes the fear of the consequence, oh, what would happen? I have to pay the bills. I got to feed my kids. And because of that fear, we sometimes play the tricks with ourselves of confusion. But if you take the pressure, look, you don't have to take action. Just start telling the truth. That starts a process inside. And so it might just begin with, I'm not in love with this woman anymore. I haven't been in love for 4 years. That you don't have to leave, but just start feeling that. It might sound like, I hate my job. I hate it. Feel that. You don't have to leave your job because maybe you got mouths to feed. You got children to be responsible for, right? And that's part of it. It's like as a man, is the willingness to be responsible for something bigger than yourself, right? To me, side note, a man doesn't become a man until he's willing to be responsible for something or someone more than himself. And so you might say, I hate my job. Feel that. Feel it. Let it burn you, because it will burn you if you start feeling the truth. And that burn is a slow cooking, a slow boil that will stir something in you. You may not leave today, but it will stir something within you that will then take you through a process that with time will move you in a direction. So I think if we can start with the truth, it's the truth that sets us free and moves us into a different trajectory.
And it's powerful to feel that truth, right? Because there's also, it's elusive, you know, there's a whisper of fear and there's a whisper of escape that can come in, and we can really, it's that practice of disseminating, like discerning truth from semi-truth or fiction or half-truth or transitory truth, if you know what I mean.
But I think that's the path of being a man, is the willingness to be that ruthlessly honest. It's part of what I think being a human is, but being a man is the willingness to be that ruthlessly honest. To say, yeah, I know. You know if this is not right. You're just afraid. Maybe you don't take action, but if you were to say, I know this relationship is not right for me, but I'm afraid that I'm going to disappoint her, so I'm not ready to speak my truth yet. Okay, at least you're being honest about that. But don't bullshit yourself as a man, like, well, I'm not sure. And I know. Deep down, you know. How many times, let's take a relationship example. Have you stepped out of a relationship in the past and you went back and forth? Should I stay? Should I go? I'm not. And when you broke up, you told your friend, I knew that was not going to work. we knew deep down, like, I knew it. When did you know it, bro? The third day, you know, the second month, like deep down we know it, but we're not courageous enough to trust that knowing. You already know. And often that knowing is that first sense that we get before the mind kicks in. And because the mind can rationalize anything. The mind can make us believe anything about anything to just sort of, well, the reason I'm not really, doing the thing I know I need to do is because, the economy and I got to be, and we start believing our own bullshit. So as men, we have to be willing to be honest and ruthlessly true with ourselves. What we choose to do with that is another thing. But at least we're being honest. That's what starts moving us in the direction of freedom.
Got it. So we're now on this path of truth, and we feel we're being guided by our spirit or by spirit. And we're starting to do the work. We're starting to clean up some of the pains and the traumas along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the obstacles I've seen with many men, the men I've spoken to, is the kind of spiritual ego that comes in. It cleverly disguised itself as the spiritual path and, moving through source, but actually starts to pollute the actions and the orientation of our direction we're moving in. And I guess the question for you is, you've been on this path for a long time and you've guided many people on the spiritual path. How do we start to spot our spiritual ego coming in and taking control and leading us down a path that's not our true direction?
I think we have to be honest. It's simple, in one level. We know when we're bullshitting ourselves. It has a different feeling. It has a different texture in your heart, has a different texture in your body. Because often when you are lying to yourself, you're trying to convince yourself and you're trying to convince other people. But when you're truly being true, you feel a certain deeper peace inside with no need to convince the world and convince other people. I would say that spiritual ego is something we have to be aware of. Spiritual ego is the sense of, identifying with ourselves as spiritual. And that identity of being spiritual can get in the way of you being real, of you being authentic, of you being genuine, of you being truly yourself, because now spirituality becomes an identity. Spirituality now in itself becomes a must. Oh, namaste. It's like, fuck namaste. Just be real. How are you feeling? I'm feeling great. Everything is working out exactly as it should be, and it's perfect. It's like, fuck that. How you really feel, bro? You see what I'm saying? And so that's when spiritual ego can become a mask and a role and a persona that disconnects you from your deeper truth. And we end up often, when we're in spiritual ego, doing spiritual bypass, where you end up using spiritual concepts as a avoidance of real human level feelings, and that becomes a spiritual bypass that disconnects you from your true emotions, your true feeling. Like, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm pissed off. Not that you should let that run you, but it's like, I need to own it and acknowledging, like, I'm not okay right now. Someone, disrespects your wife, you're like, it's all good. No, it's not all good. I'm feeling some feelings about it, and being honest about that. And to me, that is the path of being authentic, is to acknowledge the totality of the range of your feelings without judgment. That doesn't mean you have to react. That doesn't mean you have to go start a fight. That doesn't mean you have to go kill someone. That just means I acknowledge that, hey, the full range of my human emotions and the willingness to deal with that now. That it is, I think, is what it is to be authentic. And so we have to be aware that we don't use spirituality as an identity or a fur coat. It's like, oh, spiritual people talk like this. Spiritual people have the incense. Spiritual people do this special hug to the right. Spiritual people namaste each other. Spiritual people don't say these words. Spiritual people only wear these clothes. Spiritual people only, light this particular drink, It's like, spirituality is not what you do. Spirituality is nothing special. Spirituality is just the natural state of being, because we are all spirit. So really, everything is spiritual. It's all spiritual. We're all spiritual. Nothing that special, nothing mystical. It's just what we are, And so we have to just be aware that we're not using spirituality as an identity or a fur coat. And I think in that sense, the purpose of last thing I'll say, and then actually kind of need to jump off. The purpose of spirituality is not to be spiritual. It's like, the purpose of going to the damn gym is not to go to the gym. The purpose of going to the gym is to develop reverse muscle strength so that you have the flexibility and the muscle and the stamina in life, not for the sake of going to the gym. The purpose of being spiritual is not so that you can be like, I can chant the sacred chants of the Hindu gods or sing the hymn. The purpose of spirituality is to practice and clear away your ego limitations so that you can live life as an authentic, a real, loving, kind human being. So that's my thought.
It's a powerful close on that, really powerful idea to close, because the spiritual ego is something I see creeping into a lot of people's lives and doing all the trappings of a spiritual person instead of living honestly.
Yeah, we can do another episode if you want. We can dive straight into that. We can do a part 2 anytime.
Definitely. Kute, really grateful for your, I could call it a transmission, It reminds me of when I was young and I used to go to church with my mum. It was just a beautiful feeling to hear you speak, and just really impacted my soul in so many ways. Inspiring is the word I would use. And I imagine the listeners are feeling exactly the same, and they'd love to find out where they can find you online, if there's any kind of workshops or programs you have coming up.
Yeah, I would say number 1, it's been a pleasure. If anyone's been inspired, you can get the book, The Magic of Surrender, on Amazon. Check it out. It's a transmission from my heart. But there's 2 things I would say. I'm always doing events and intensive retreats. I'm creating new events in the second half of 2025. You can go to my main website, kuteblackson.com, find out more about that. But I just launched a new masterclass. It's all around manifesting and living in alignment with your soul. And so if you're ready to manifest more in the world, your true purpose and the next level of your life, you can go to www.manifestationmasterclassonline.com, manifestationmasterclassonline.com, enter your name and your email and sign up for for the free masterclass. Also, I just released at the beginning of the year, thousands of people have been going through it, an 8-module course. It's called 8 Levels of Gratitude, www.8levelsofgratitude.com. You can enter your name and your email, receive that. Instagram, Kute Blackson, say hi. I'd love to see you at one of my events.
Fantastic. All those links are going to be in the show notes below, people, so you can go and find them yourselves. And just lastly to say a big thank you to Kute. It was beautiful talking to you. Have a, and listeners, share this with someone who you know needs to hear this sort of level of inspiration, this way in which they can surrender into find their path, their calling, and their deeper meaning, and listening to that inner peace themselves. And I'll say, ciao, ciao.